More than 30 people are still missing after a military boat sinks off the coast of Cameroon. Senate Republicans postponed the vote to replace Obamacare as President Trump's son is invited to testify before Congress. And an Oscar-winning American film director joins the effort to restore and preserve African films. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. A tragedy struck off the coast of Cameroon on Sunday, and more than 30 people are missing after a boat belonging to an elite Cameroonian military unit sank, according to a statement from the Office of the President. The logistics boat belonging to the Rapid Intervention Brigade, which has fought Nigerian Islamist group Boko Haram in recent years, was carrying 37 people when it capsized in the early morning hours. 3 soldiers were rescued, but 34 passengers are still unaccounted for. The accident at the northern end of the coast near the village of Debunsha is believed to have been caused by rough waters, but investigations are underway to learn more. Cameroon has deployed thousands of soldiers to its far north region to repel a Boko Haram insurgency that has killed more than 20,000 people in the Lake Chad region and displaced more than 2.7 million. The terrorist group has repeatedly attacked Cameroon. Now, officials in Senegal say 8 people were killed and many more injured during a stampede at the football match in Dakar. Sports Minister Matar Ba says Saturday's stampede was triggered after opposing fans clashed at a match between local teams at the Demba Diop Stadium. According to local media, police began firing tear gas into the crowd, causing panic, which caused a wall collapsed as people rushed to leave the stadium. Ba is promising strong measures so that such an event will never be repeated in Senegal. Across Somalia on Monday, residents and business owners are relieved that their internet services have been restored. A severed marine cable had left Somalia without internet for more than 3 weeks, triggering major losses for businesses. Now, the connection was cut on June the 24th after a ship sliced through an undersea fiber optic cable connecting Somalia to global data networks. Later, Somali government identified the ship that caused the disruption as Panama-flagged MSC Alice. Abdi Ansur, Somalia's Minister for Posts and Telecommunications, says his government wants the ship's owners to pay compensation for the loss of internet service. He says the outage was costing Somalia the equivalent of about $10 million in economic output per day. Now, the internet blackout had a tremendous impact on internet cafes, which provide the money transfer companies, which are lifeline for millions of Somali families who get support from their relatives in the diaspora. Well, now, for more on the impact of Somalia's internet outage, I'm joined by VOA Somali reporter Mohammed Oled. Well, everybody is relieved, Mohammed, but how was it for those 3 weeks for people in Somalia and even for you who are trying to communicate with those in Somalia?
Well, basically, the impact was very huge, especially the local people, the businesses, the hospitals, some government offices. But the country was not completely cut out of the wall, according to the connection.
Yeah.
Some companies have been providing internet connection through satellite, through their telecommunication lines, and providing only to the elite people and people who could afford the money to pay these kinds of expensive internet connections. But majority of the people were suffered, and businessmen lost. And the government said per day, the 23 days when the communication was out, every day $10 million was lost in business.
That's
in
quite a lot of money.
So it's a huge money.
Now, the minister is saying that they will require or demand that the ship that kind of cut this cable pay. But then, was there a way for the ship to know, or for the captain to know that there's a cable there?
Yeah, we made a communication with a Somali company that provides the fiber optic line, and also they told me that the ship authorities were saying that there was no sign showing that there was a cable coming from the sea to Mogadishu near the Somali Mogadishu port. So they say it was not their fault, and the government's demanding compensation for what happened. You can imagine 10 million a day times 23 days. is a huge money. So the ship owners are saying it was not their mistake, but the government is saying since they have caused the mistake, since they have caused the damage and the loss, they have to compensate.
Now, we know that communication still exists in the kind of semi-old-fashioned way, but there's a lot now that is been transferred to internet, especially within the police system. And Mogadishu, Somalia is under the threat of Al-Shabaab. Was there security concerns because of this particular outage?
Well, on the contrary, some people who rushed to this internet and their social media sites today were talking about different things. They were saying since the internet connection lost, Mogadishu looked rather stable and no major incident or plus was reported. And they were saying if this connection returned, if anything happens today, some of the comments I read, if a blast comes back or any major violence breaks out in Mogadishu, that could be the internet connection provided.
So which means that sometimes perhaps there's more communication between the terrorists when there's internet. An outage actually is perhaps an advantage.
Yeah, there's suspicion that the government or security agencies listen some telecommunication lines of Al-Shabaab authorities. So anyone from Al-Shabaab who is organizing an attack or violence in Mogadishu could use social media to communicate among themselves. So some security analysts say that the internet could provide more stable connection than the telephone lines to those trying to organize such violence in Somalia. So some people have mixed feelings about return of internet connection. Some are saying it provided a little bit security to Mogadishu while it was out. Others saying it cost a lot of money to the people and life in Mogadishu. But it's still unclear. Yeah, it's a mix of matter of...
We'll find out how things play out in the coming days. Thanks a lot, Mohammed, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to VOA Somalia reporter Mohammed Olad. Well, our next story is about a young Gambian man who, in search of a better future, finds the journey from Africa to Europe fraught with danger and humiliation. He now shares his harrowing experience with other young people to deter them from following in his footsteps. 25-year-old Gambian Mustafa recalls his perilous journey from Gambia to Libya, where he was detained as he tried to make it through the desert to Europe.
Every day you hear gun sounds, you see people being shot, people being beaten, people getting tortured. Every day you see it. I never heard a gun sound until I reached Libya. Here in Gambia, I never had gun sound until Libya. And Libya every day, morning, night, anytime. These heavy weapons, you will hear it like RPG, boom, until the house will be shaking.
Now back in Banjul, he's keen to prevent other young people from taking the same perilous path. Alongside his friend Lamin, they're working with youth against irregular migration to warn others of the dangers of illegal migration.
So after reaching to Libya, at the first checkpoint, they strip us there, take all our monies, our belongings, our bags, everything. So they put us back to the pickup and say, that's our pay before we enter Libya.
Mustafa used smugglers to cross the desert through Niger. Libya is the main launching point for people risking their lives to reach Europe. But Mustafa and Lamin want to put an end to that.
Because Libya is like a prison. That's why we are sensitizing all the young people so that they can stay and we can work on our future from here. We are going to help each other with this association so that we can try to take control of our future.
Only last month, a Spanish police ship, Rio Siguaro, rescued over 1,000 migrants off the coast of Libya over a period of 24 hours. They said the migrants were rescued from a number of dinghies that were adrift and included people from Nigeria, South Africa, Mali, Ghana, Gambia, Niger, Guinea, Benin, and Togo. 500,000 people have crossed the Mediterranean from Libya to Italy over the past 4 years, mainly sub-Saharan Africans who pay smugglers to shepherd them across the desert to Libya and onward to Europe in unseaworthy dinghies. At least 20,000 migrants are being detained in Libya, the main gateway to those attempting to reach Europe by sea. That's according to the International Organization for Migration. And on to Central Africa, 5 park rangers were killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo during a joint operation with the army to rescue an American journalist and 3 park rangers. Local officials said the journalists and rangers went missing in a wildlife reserve in eastern DRC. Gunmen attacked the group late Friday in the Okapi Wildlife Reserve in Mombasa territory. Now, the head of Congo's Park Service confirmed that the journalists and rangers had been rescued from a group of Mai Mai militia fighters involved in mining gold inside the reserve. The U.S. State Department has not identified the journalist who was rescued because of privacy concerns. Well, the tragedy of human trafficking was in the spotlight this week on Capitol Hill as a rare bipartisan vote by the U.S. House of Representatives renewed $520 million in funding for efforts to combat the problem and aid survivors. VOA's Catherine Gibson spoke with the 2 lawmakers leading the fight against this worldwide threat.
The global costs of modern-day slavery calculated by the U.S. Congress.
It distorts labor markets, it destroys people, erodes communities, it undermines stability and rule of law, and it's fueled by corruption, greed, and violence.
Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry worldwide, and more than half of the 20 million people trafficked globally are women and girls. Just weeks after the Trump administration added China to a list of worst offenders that includes Russia, Iran, and Syria, lawmakers pledged funds to a fight that goes beyond national borders. Money that has a very real impact on the lives of trafficking survivors.
You need resources like the resources that are being reauthorized on the Hill to ensure that survivors have basic needs met: housing, food, access to counseling, access to legal representation. When someone's been through trafficking, it's akin to slavery. They've lost everything.
Powell, who works with survivors around the world, says the problem is widespread.
We all see trafficking and don't realize it.
A harsh reality that brought the problem close to members of Congress.
Most folks think that the problem is far away from their home. They think it might be overseas in a different country or in an urban city or around big events, but we're finding it everywhere.
One of the earliest voices in Congress to speak up about human trafficking, Representative Chris Smith, says the bill takes innovative approaches to the problem.
The profits that are gleaned by the traffickers, once we arrest them, we can assess those assets and put them into a victims fund.
And puts countries worldwide on notice.
We'll make sure that if it's a foreign country, we don't give them military assistance unless they can get a handle on their human trafficking.
Lee represents Houston, one of the epicenters of human trafficking in the United States.
Houston is a teeming metropolis. There are many places that can be used as a shadow of a business, but then they are a place for human trafficking. And those trafficking victims are vulnerable, they're scared, they speak a different language, and they're a victim. That human trafficking is a scourge that is a blight on all of us.
A reminder the fight is far from over. Catherine Gibson, Capitol Hill, VOA News.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, a healthcare vote postponed. Trump Jr. in the hot seat. A look at the week ahead in Washington. Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
I'm Millar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Sanctions policies targeting rogue states risk being ineffective due to a lack of coordination between the European Union and the United States, as according to a new report from British analyst group, the Royal United Services Institute. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
North Korea's recent test of an intercontinental ballistic missile prompted the United States to push for new sanctions against both Pyongyang and the foreign firms that Washington says provide it with an economic lifeline.
We intend to present these firms with a clear choice. You can do business with us or you can do business with North Korea, but you cannot do business with both.
The fragmented nature of international sanctions, enforced separately by the UN, the United States and the European Union, renders them less effective against Pyongyang, argues report author Emil Dahl.
It relies on a complex network of overseas front companies, shell companies, agents that are acting on behalf of the North Korean regime, people that are simply not captured on sanctions lists.
Dahl notes recent examples of effective coordination. It's 2 years since the so-called P5+1 countries, the United States, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom plus Germany, signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. That agreement saw some EU and US sanctions lifted in return for limits on Tehran's nuclear program. The United States and Europe have also implemented similar sanctions against Russian individuals and companies following Moscow's forceful takeover of Crimea and invasion of eastern Ukraine. But the nature of the European Union means targets are often able to evade sanctions.
You've got all member states who have to agree unanimously to imposing new sanctions. In the European Union, there is also the prospect of legal challenges in the European courts.
US sanctions are more adaptable as rogue states try to evade the measures.
The US is able to more rapidly put in place new measures and new designations that counteracts that. The solution is closer communication, both between the US and the EU on sanctions regimes, but it's also closer communication with the private sector. At the end of the day, the private sector is the implementer of sanctions.
Britain's EU exit complicates the picture. The report says London will be able to move more quickly in imposing and adapting sanctions outside the EU. But any measures will have less clout without European enforcement. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, the future of America's healthcare system remains an open question as Republicans once again postpone a vote on their plan to replace Obamacare. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's team continues to grapple with a fallout from emails showing the president's son eager to acquire Russian-provided ammunition against Hillary Clinton during last year's campaign. VOA's Michael Bowman has our report.
President Trump's latest tweets accuse the news media of distorting democracy and treating Donald Trump Jr. unfairly.
My son is a wonderful young man. He took a meeting with a Russian lawyer, not a government lawyer, but a Russian lawyer.
But a Russian-American lobbyist with possible ties to Russian intelligence is now known to have attended the June 2016 meeting, and Trump Jr.'s conflicting accounts are drawing scrutiny.
He first said no such meeting ever happened, and then he said the meeting was about adoptions, and then he admitted the meeting was about getting information on Hillary Clinton, and that he wasn't forthcoming about who was in the meeting. So we can't accept anything Don Jr. says. And of course, we can't accept much the president says about this either.
Donald Trump Jr. himself said things should have been done differently. Having said that again, none of that is violation of the law.
Trump's legal team insists the president did not even know about his son's meeting. Trump Jr. has been invited to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee as early as this week.
I'm more than happy to be transparent about it, and I'm more than happy to cooperate with everyone.
Meanwhile, a vote on a Republican health care plan has been postponed yet again as Senator John McCain recovers from unexpected surgery. Republicans need every possible yes vote, given united Democratic opposition and 2 confirmed no votes within their caucus.
It could lead to insurance plans that really are barely insurance at all. It would cause premiums to increase for some very vulnerable individuals, including those with pre-existing conditions.
Not so, according to the White House.
You're going to finally have great health care at a lower price.
A half-dozen wavering Republicans could announce support or opposition this week when projections of the revised plan's impact on coverage and affordability are released by the Congressional Budget Office. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. An Oscar-winning American director signs on to restore African films. We'll be right back.
Decent housing, demands for decent jobs, and demands for free and decolonized education.
Sir.
To put up this exhibition is just a way of saying to people, let's talk about this.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. An iconic fast food chain is hoping to make a difference in its future. McDonald's is turning to innovation in a bid to remain relevant. That includes expanding delivery, digital ordering kiosks in restaurants, and rolling out an app that saves precious seconds. McDonald's estimates it would take 10 seconds for a customer to tell an employee their order number using its new app, down from the 17-second average of ordering at the drive-thru, a difference that could help ease pileups. Now, the push comes as McDonald's stock has hit all-time highs as investors cheer a turnaround plan that has included slashed costs and expansion overseas. Well, next up, designers in Cuba are turning trash to a treasure as they think outside the box and repurpose garbage amidst a shortage of and recycling materials that have been thrown away. The government has allowed more Cubans to set up their own businesses in recent years as part of its plan to update its ailing Soviet-style economy and cut the bloated state payroll. As a result, the number of Cubans self-employed more than tripled, in fact, in 6 years to above 500,000 by the end of 2016, official data shows. Well, and finally, researchers have come up with a novel way to try to get teenagers to break their late-night mobile phone addiction. Well, many teens get far less than the recommended 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night because they are often up late, browsing social media and responding to texts. Now, lack of sleep can significantly affect academic performance in young minds. Now, researchers from the Black Dog Institute in Australia are discovering more about its link to poor self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. The app Sleep Ninja may be a solution. It tracks sleeping habits and responds with clinically tested tips like having a hot bath and organizing your school bag. The app is still in the testing phase, and that is what is trending today. Well, American filmmaker Martin Scorsese is backing an international effort to preserve African movies, hoping to protect the work of some of Africa's most influential directors. Azuma Kampaura reports.
Preserving the past for the future. That's the goal of the African Film Heritage Project, restoring some of Africa's most important and influential movies. Academy Award-winning director Martin Scorsese is among those sponsoring the effort.
The idea of the World Cinema Foundation was to restore and make available, as best as possible, films made in areas that really don't have the infrastructure, the archival infrastructure to take care of these films and take care of their cultural heritage.
Scorsese's Film Foundation is joining the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers and UNESCO to safeguard the power of African culture.
We will not just give justice to the African history and creativity, but we will encourage also nowadays young people to continue to embark on new journeys through partnerships and to continue to create.
50 films were selected for restoration by African directors, movies Scorsese says are a hidden part of the continent's history.
Those films were made by Africans, about Africans, for the world, and it's time to take that as another facet of the culture, the creative thinking, the creative action of the entire continent.
Director Yemani Desimier teaches filmmaking at New York University.
Many African films that were made in the previous century don't have the opportunity to be screened by filmmakers all over the world, be they African, Australian, or Bolivian. And it is with such initiatives that these films become part of the vernacular, of the international vernacular.
Scorsese told VOA that young filmmakers everywhere would benefit from taking a longer look at African cinema.
I think it's something that could be very fruitful for young people who are beginning to make their own films or are making their own films.
In the past 10 years, Scorsese's World Cinema Project has helped restore films from Egypt and Senegal, as well as from India, Armenia, Brazil, and the Philippines. Azuma Kampaura for VOA News, New York.
Well, and that's our show for today. Now, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.